All right, subcourse QM 5025 Edition 6, receiving issuing bulk petroleum products using a fuel supply system supply point Fssp 101-519-2158 Aipd Army Correspondence Course Program. Um, Introduction: receive issuing bulk petroleum product using the fuel system supply point. The fuel system supply point Army's primary means of receiving, storing, issuing bulk petroleum products. The combat forces in the field receiving, issuing bulk petroleum product using the fuel system supply point. In lesson 1, you will learn how to receive the issuing the bulk petroleum products using the fuel system supply point. To understand the procedure of receiving, issuing bulk petroleum products during using the fuel system supply point, you must be able to follow the current safety precautions laying out the procedures of a fuel system supply point. Receive the bulk products using the fuel system supply point. Issuing petroleum products using the fuel system supply point. Learning event number 1: how follow the correct safety precautions. Lay out the procedure. Safety precautions: whenever working with petroleum product, there is a risk of fire. The danger can be reduced following the proper safety precautions during all phases of the operation. Primary precaution: the prohibiting smoking near the fuel system supply point. Posting no smoking signs so that anyone entering the working in a supply point can see the signs immediately. Do not let anyone carry the matches or smoking materials in the supply point. Collecting the smoking materials, enhancing entrance checkpoint, and ensuring that personal smoke only is designated in smoking areas. Place the fire extinguisher at all the receipts and storage issue points. All the fire extinguishers must be operational, inspected daily. Ensure the equipment is grounded. Follow the proper grounding and bounding of the pressure procedures during the following fuel transfer operations. If the enemy attacks electrical storm fire in the immediate area, stop operations immediately. Disconnect all the pump hoses and move all the vehicles out of the area. If possible, if the fire breaks out over the manhole, cover the tank vehicle, and over the hinge of dome, cover the railway tanker car. Stop the transfer operations. Close the manhole dome cover. This will extinguish the flames. Do not permit welding or open flames lights or other approved explosion-proof flashlights within 100 feet of any receipt or storage issue operation. When operating the pump, you can see the sparks and stop at the pump and inspecting all the grounding bounding connections. Make sure the connections are bare with metal-to-metal contact. If you cannot find any of the faulty connections, look at the power equipment in the area to find the possible cause of the stray current. Maintain a distance of at least 25 feet between the tank vehicles during the receipt and issue operations. Also keep all the tractor coupled with the semi-trailers while the product is transferred. This allows the semi-trailer to be moved quickly in emergency. The canvas top of the recurrent and of the tractor must cover the driver. The compartment of the vehicle is carrying loading, unloading product. This keeps the inside of the tractor from being splashed with fuel. Do not use the nozzle with the equipped locking device. If it will, the nozzle will equip with the locking device. Disable the locking device before. Ensure the nozzles are attended with constantly with refueling. Trip all the precautions possible to prevent spills using the drip pans. And whenever the hose was not being connected, disconnect and repair all the leaks immediately. If needed, replace the defective hose, gaskets, and valves. All personnel must be properly trained and follow all safety precautions. They must know how to properly administer first aid to the fuel-related injuries. Layout procedure of the fuel system supply point. It contains about two 350 gallon per minute. The pumping assemblies are two 350 gallon per minute filter separators, 6 of 10,000 gallon collapsible tanks, 6 bottom loading points for the tank vehicles, 2 500 gallon collapsible drum filling points, 6 refueling points for filling 5 gallon cans for 55 gallon drums, and retail issue of the vehicle fuel tank system components connected with approximately 2,400 feet of hose and 11 types of fittings. The fuel system supply point is designed to be flexible in layout. The system layout depends on the need of the mission, the variable of the terrain, the must layout of the system, and identify the components needed. For example, your mission does not include the filling of 500 gallon collapsible drums, then you do not include the filling points in your layout. The fuel system supply point can be used in receiving, storing, and issuing 2 types of the fuel without using an additional equipment. This is done by dividing system into 2 smaller components by splitting in your fuel system supply point in half. You can also operate 2 different locations simultaneously. So this method makes it easier to keep the advancing forces by half of the system at a time. The other half of the stay in operation movement when the first half of the operation of the process is called leapfrogging. No matter how the system is laid, the certain requirements must be met with figure 1 with a list of minimum distance must be maintained between the items of equipment. Whether one pump or 2 are used as part of the same system, there must be both a receiving point and an issuing point. The receiving and issuing points are separated as much as possible to avoid congestion and possible confusion. Figure 1 shows the usual distance between the components of the fuel system: supply point, receipt manifold, receiving pump 60 feet, receiving pump manifold on the first tank 60 feet, 110,000 gallon, 10,000 gallon tank 40 feet, manifold last tank of the discharge pump 60 feet, discharge pump the filter separator 40 feet, filter separator fuel servicing nozzle 60 feet, fuel servicing nozzle, fuel servicing nozzle 25 feet, last fuel service nozzle, and the first 500 gallon drum filling point 75 feet, 500 gram drum filling point to 500 gram drum filling point 50 feet, list of 500 gallon drum point to the first bottom loading point 75 feet, bottom loading point to the bottom loading point 75 feet. The basic step for the tank manifold remains the same regardless of the number of the tanks used for layout design. The manifold for each of the tank must be assembled so that the fuel can be received, issued because of the 10,000 gallon collapsible tanks that has only the filter discharge. The basic manifold for each of the tanks is shown in Figure 2. Figure 2 shows the manifold hose assembly with a 2T assembly headed with the filter discharge assembly collapsible tank over to the 1T manifold assembly in the 4 sections with 2 4-inch suction hoses. Various ways of laying out the complete fuel forward supply system. Forward system supply point are shown in Figure 3 with the layout of the system is the best way possible for the specific situation. After you decide how to lay out the system, you must prepare the areas where the tanks are positioned. Will be positioned, pick up all the loose debris. All the collapsible tanks will be surrounded with the firewall. The firewall must be large enough to contain the entire content with the tank plus one of the foot of freeboard empty space. To meet this requirement, the firewall must be inside the diameter 26 by 26 feet. The firewall must be 3 feet high and 8 inches wide at the top of the berm. Figure 4 displays a berm in construction. When constructing the firewall, water drain must be installed with the buying of the suction at the hose, the last release point of the possible. Then the firewall, the drain is closed at the times except for the drain water and is collected in the berm. This shows a berm construction slope centered towards 1 degree drain for the surface water. Alright, here was the possible arrangement of the fuel system supply points. You have your U arrangement, the receiving point, receiving pump, filter separator, and collapsible tanks going in a U shape with a filter separator and delivery pump going into the bottom loading points, 500 collapsible drum fillings and nozzles. The rectangular arrangement gives a receiving point, receiving pump, filter separator, and a parallel in a square in a rectangular collapsible tanks going through a delivery pump filter separated bottom loading 500 gallon collapsible drum filtering nozzling. All right, your semicircular arrangement is the goes from the receiving point, receiving pump to the filter separator to the semicircular arrangement back to the delivery pump and the fuel supply, going to the nozzles, 500 gallon collapsible drum filling points, bottom loading points. The V arrangement is a receiving point, receiving pump, the V filter separator to the V arrangement with the collapsible tanks, delivery to the delivery pump to the filter separator to the nozzle, 500 collapsible drum filling points, bottom loading points. There are inside the berms are level the possible slight slope of 1 to 2 degrees toward these discharge assembly. The slope helps and empty the tank. A hole in 1 feet of the deep is dug under the discharge assembly for the use of a sump. Using the ground cloths to protect the bottom of the tank. These may cause canvas tarpaulins or unserviceable tanks. In some areas, ground cloths are required to prevent possible ground contamination in case of leaks if the tank ruptures. Filter separators are placed in systems so that they can be bypassed by the maintenance. But if you're using the complete system, place one separator with the receiving side of the system and another issue side with another alternative to the place of both separators issue side connecting manifold so that one is taken out of service and the other may be used. Filter separator must be placed in the system, permitting the filter to fuel during the tank of the transfers. When personnel are looking at laying out the hoses for the system, ensure that only one remove the dust cap plugs that are ready to make the connection. If the connection is made, the dust plugs are placed inside the dust caps to prevent the contamination of the hose. The place the connected caps and plugs under the connection to raise the hose connection off the ground and make it easier to spot leak. So that before the connection is made, I'm sure the gasket and the female coupling is present and cam locks are serviceable. Learning event 2: receiving bulk petroleum products. Primarily the procedure to avoid interruptions related. Prepare the receiving schedule before the products arrive. You notify the type of the amount of the product as well as the date and time of arrival before receiving the product. Inspect the pumps, filter separators, hose, valve fillings, and clean it for cleanliness, good working condition. Check the collapsible tanks for cleanliness and damage available for the product space for the receipt. Does do this before the product arrives at the location. When the transfer arrives, position it so that no strain of the hose connection is killed with spotting If the unloading more than one transport at the same time, make sure that at least the 25 feet of the bound grounding of the transport compound, here the seal number on the transport tape with the number of the shipping documentation is detected with the tampering. If there's a broken seal that do not match the shipping documentations, notify the property authorities. Do not unload or use the product until it has been gauged, sampled, and tested. If the seals are not used to unload, verify the quantity and quality before loading. Inspect the transportator for leaks and transportation is leaking. If the transportator is leaking, place a drip pan and catch the leak. Unload the fuel at once and be sure to clean up any spilled fuel immediately. Unload tank vehicles. Before starting unloading operation, make sure the vehicles have the major components with the supply point bounded with the grounded place. The drip pan under the manifold for the vehicle before making the connection. Make sure that you have a fire extinguisher near the receiving point. You follow the safety precautions. Connect the suction hose to the discharge port of the vehicle. Assign someone to watch the level of the fuel of the product of the discharge of the vehicle. Make sure the manhole stays open during operation. Keep the manhole open. Prevent the tank shell from collapsing if the vent of the fuel valve on the tanker does not work. Open the discharge valve of the tank of the valve of the suction valve with the 350 gallon per minute and pumping assembly with the fuel system supply point starting the pump idle with the appropriate speed with the 3 to 5 minutes. Lesson 1 learning event 2 continued. Make sure the tanks have enough ullage empty space to receive the product when the pump is idling. Open the manifold valves on the collapsible tank to be filled. Make sure that the valves between the collapsible tank and the vehicles are on. One except for the pump of the discharge valve. The pump warms up slowly only when the pump discharge valve. The discharge valve is fully open. The product is flowing slowly. Increase the pump speed to achieve the desired flow rate. While tanking the vehicle is unloaded, check the hoses of the valves of the pumps receiving the tanks for leaks. To place the drip pan under any leak, stop the operation immediately. Make any necessary repairs before continuing the operation. When the transporter is empty, idle the pump of the engine, then close the discharge valve and allow the engine to idle for 3 to 5 minutes before turning it off. Close the pump suction valve to close the manhole and open all the valves. Disconnect the suction hose and the transport with the ground wire from the vehicle. The vehicle moved over the air and prepare for the next operation. Unloading the tanker cars, you may be able to set up the fuel system supply point close enough to the railroad track to receive product for the railway tanker cars. This will allow large shipments of fuel, which will allow other materials to be moved to the vehicle on the main supply and route. When receiving a product of the railway car, use the standard car for the movement of the spot railway cars. After spotting the brakes, check the wheels. Place the signing reading with the stop tanker car connected between the rails and distance at least 25 feet ahead of behind the railway car. Ensure the rails are grounded with the connecting wire of the both tracks to the grounded wire. Position the fire extinguisher all unloading the points. Having a dripping pans available, the cone shape with the wooden plug with the required to use the case bottom of the oil valve is open when the cap is removed. When the rail tanker car is in position, grounded may be grounded. Make a quick inspection for the leaks. Receive the railway car. If you receive a railway car that is leaking, placing a drip pan under the leak, unload the car as soon as possible. Perform preliminary steps to ensure that the product is suitable for the use and have not been tampered with. Unload the railway tanker car through the bottom outlet valve unless the valve is broken, unless the proper adapter for the railway tanker car is available. In this case, unload the car from the dome with a suction hose. When operating the manhole, cover the railway car standing up inside. Avoid the breathing fumes. If possible, release the internal pressure before opening. Check the side of the bottom outlet pipe with the correct size adapter with using the adjustable Gulsler coupling. And the size is not important. Outlets pipes vary in size from 4 inches to 6 inches, so that the important use of the correct size adapter connection. The suction hose to the adapter and open all the valves of the pump. Suction figure 5. Open the pump suction valve. Start the pump idle the pump 3 to 5 minutes while the pumping is idling. Open the valve between the pumping and the discharge, receiving the tank, having one person monitoring the fuel level in the tank is unloaded. The pumping the engine warms up and slowly opens the discharge valve and increases the pump speed with the desired flow rate while transferring the product. Make sure that during operation maintenance is performed by the pump operator. Also ensure that all hoses, valves, and tanks receiving the product are checked for leaks. If the leak found during the unloading, place the drip pan under the leak. Stop the operation. Make the necessary repairs for resuming the transfer operation. When the railway tanker car is empty, slowly pump the engine to idle speed. Close the pump discharge. Allow other valves to allow the pump to idle for 3 to 5 minutes before shutting it off. Close the suction valve. Close the bottom outlet valve of the railway tanker car. Disconnect the suction hose from the railway car. Remove the adapter. Replace the outlet cap and close the manhole cover. On all sides of the railway car, diamond-shaped cards say that flammable. Remove the cards. Replace them with dangerous empty cards. Some of the cards are printed on both sides with the case of flip them over. Disconnect the ground wire from the rail car. Release the brakes and remove the chock block. Remove from the transfer area. Notify the proper authorities the car is ready to be removed. Alright, figure 5 shows unloading the railway cars from the tanker cars. The top picture, you see a damaged drainage tube, 550-gallon pump assembly, a pump suction hose, a grounded wire and rod, and a bottom outlet. The bottom outlet has a tanker car elbow and the drainage tube into an outlet cap and a drainage tube. Receipt of the product through the salt hose line. In some cases, the receipt of the product for your fuel system supply point and salt hose line, as with the railway tanker that has the advantage to free up the mailing supply report. For other types of supply, an advantage and added advantage of being able to receive more product into your system, assuming there's an adequate source at the other end of the hose line. The salt hose line usually connects directly into the manifold system on the discharge side of the receiving pump. Figure 6 depicts the salt hose line attached with the fuel system supply point. You can connect the salt hose line to the 50,000-gallon collapsible tank with a setup. You must have good communications with the pump station on the hose line. You must maintain constant contact with a pump station upstream to prevent overfilling or rupturing of your collapsible tank. You will receive pumping orders before the operation begins. Pumping orders tell your operation begins how much fuel you will receive and how long the pumping operation will take. And then receiving the pump order, and then ensure that you have enough fuelage receiving the quantity designated. You want to transfer the product in permanently filled tanks consolidated with fuel on hand. Doing this is reducing the number of the tanks switching during the receipt. Once you have decided which tanks are to receive the product, then you can determine the valves needed to be opened. Remember that you are switching tanks to open the valves to the next tank before closing the valve to the first tank. Failure to follow this procedure results in overfilling or rupturing the tank. When it is time for the operating to begin, the open valve is necessary for the receipt, except for the valve connecting hose line to the fuel system supply point. Notify the pump station upstream that you are ready to receive the pump. The station operator tells you when to open the final valve and begin receiving the product. When the product is starting and arriving in the fuel system supply point, check hose of the valve leaks. Observe collapsible tank to be sure that it is receiving the fuel, sending out the patrol, inspecting the hose line with leaks of the signs and tampering sabotage. If you receive a large amount of fuel within the fuel system supply, more than one tank is required. With receiving the tank is almost full, one of the open valve necessary to stop the flow of the product in the next tank. Which the product is into the both tanks. Wait until the first tank is completely filled before closing the valve to allow the flow into the new tank. Continue in this manner until you have received the entire quantity. Figure 6 shows the product of the forward supply point through an assault hose line. Receiving point at the pump, the assault hose line, the filter separated to the tanks, and then into like another loop with a pump and filter separated to the bottom loading points, 500-gallon collapsible drum filling points, and nozzles. If you are receiving the product of the tank and are full, and it's your responsibility to notify the pump station operation should do the down the operation. Remember that you must slowly graduate and receive the specific amount the pump station operator notifies when you are being shut down. If at any time during the receipt of this fire, the enemy attacks or other emergency, notify the pump station operator should shut down the operation immediately after the receipt is completed. Close all the valves or perform after operation maintenance and prepare for the next operation. Learning Event 3, Issuing Bulk Petroleum. Preliminary procedures. Issuing bulk petroleum is perhaps the most important responsibility you have with the fuel supply system. You are fueled and to provide with the consuming units of the fuel to perform the mission. In the 3-day operation, you issue the fuel to bulk as forward as possible. Usually, the units are support pickup of the petroleum bulk petroleum from the you and their organic vehicles. However, they may be sometimes the vehicles are assigned to unit delivery to the units. Prepare an issue schedule before the transporter arrives at the fuel system supply point. Start by telling your customer what type of them, how much fuel you have on hand. Then tell the customer when to pick it up the product at your facility. If your transporter is delivering the product, tell the customer when to expect the delivery, and so how he can be prepared for its arrival. To avoid delays, interruptions, schedule issuing. In other words, do not have more transporters at your supply point that you can handle at one time. Also, make sure you have enough product on hand to fill all the requests. Inspect your pumps, filter separators, collapsible tank hose, and manifold valve fittings to make sure that they are free of leaks and contamination. Loading tank of vehicle. The transporter arrives at the fuel system supply point and the issue point attached to the ground motor. The transporter to open the manhole's dome cover to inspect the transport. Note that the following inspection can be performed. The entrance checkpoint. Check the inside and outside of the tank. If the holes, cracks, loose plates, make sure that there's no leaks in the tank, and the tanks must be properly mounted to the frame and safe for the road. Inspect the interior of the tank. If you see any of the residues such as rust, sand, dirt, and rejected transport, have the clean. Check the interior of the tank and the foreign objects such as tool bolts and old seals that have authorized personnel remove objects from the tank. Connect the discharge hose receiving the port of the vehicle. 3 soldiers are needed to load the tank of the vehicle. Assign 1 to watch the product entering. 1 to assign to watch the product as it enters the tank so that you do not overfill the vehicle. In addition to the person on the vehicle, there must be 1 person at the vehicle's valves and 1 person at the pump. Coordinating between them is important to avoid overfilling. Once the receiving valve of the vehicle is manifold valve of the collapsible tank supply the product, make sure all the other valves between the collapsible tank and the tank vehicles are open. Open the suction valve of the 350 gallon per minute pump assembly. Start the pump, idle the pump 3 to 5 minutes to allow the pump to warm up. Open the discharge valve of the pump slowly. Increase the engine speed to obtain the desired pump rate. Pump at the rate until the vehicle tank is 3/4 full. Then reduce the engine speed, continuing the pump until the vehicle is full. Idle the pump and close the discharge valve. Be sure to allow the pumping engine to idle 3 to 5 minutes before shutting it off. Close all the valves where they open for the transfer operation. Disconnects and discharge hose from the tank vehicle. The product must stand in to 15 minutes. Allow the suspended water sediment to settle to dissipate the static electricity in the product. The vehicle must be engaged and have a sample drawn with the manhole cover to remove the drip pan, disconnect the bonding and the grounding wire from the vehicle, put a seal on the man cover, the bottom of the outlet, and on the bottom of the outlet, write the serial numbers on the transfer documentation. The documents have the transporter move out of the area and prepare for your next operation. Loading railway tanker cars. There may be mid-time for the issuing of the products into the railway tanker cars for your forward system supply point. This advantage is being able to move large quantities of fuel forward location without adding the traffic on the main supply route. Allow all load of tanker cars through the bottom outlet unless the bottom of the outlet is broken and correct adapter fittings are unavailable. When unable to use the bottom outlet, load the tanker car through the dome. Loading through the bottom outlet is far better than because it prevents vapor formation. Reduces static electricity, protects the fuel against contamination and outside sources. Follow the safety precautions outlined in Learning Event 2. After you inspect the tanker car and are assured of the conditions, ensure the track rails are properly bound and grounded. Inspect the mechanical cable connection. Make sure that it's secure and make a bare metal-to-metal contact the rail and car and all major components with the supply point system must be bound and grounded to the fire extinguisher near the tank of the car. Make sure that easy to see the reach. Put a drip pan under the bottom of the outside of the tanker car and connect the discharge hose at the bottom outlet of the tanker car elbow. Necessary fittings from the fuel system supply point station. Someone with the upwinding side of the dome signal when production reaches the full mark. Open the bottom outlet valve of the tanker car manifold valve of the collapsible tank, supplying the product. Make sure that all the valves between the tank of the car and the collapsible tank are open, and open the suction valve of the 350 gallon per minute assembly. Pumping assembly. Start the pumping engine. Allow it to idle for 3 to 5 minutes. Open the discharge valve of the pump to increase the speed of the desired flow rate. Have the person on the tank car check for the product level in the rail car to avoid overfilling. And never allow them to put his inside of the dome tank. Whenever the tanker car is 3/4 of the filled, reduce the pumping rate and continue the pumping until the product reaches the fill mark. If the tanker car has no full mark, fill it into the top of the tank shell. Idle the pump of the engine with a quickly closing the discharge valve tank of the car bottom outlet, allowing the pump engine to the idle 3 to 5 minutes before turning it off. Next, close the manifold valve and collapsible tank suction valve on the pump. Close all the other valves and we're open to transfer the disconnect the discharge hose and allow elbow adapter for the tanker car. Replace the bottom outlet cap other than the inspection gasket. Replace the gasket and after the product must stand for 15 minutes. Allow the suspended water settlement to settle and dissipate any static electricity in the product. The rail car is gauged in the sample drawn. Check the lock of the dome cover to place the shield, the numbers of shipping documentation. Release the brakes. Remove the tanker car from the issuing point. Check the change the flame car to the side of the rail car to the read flammable. The procedural loading tank of the car for the dome are almost the same as those at the bottom and loading. You operate the pump the same way, perform the same preliminary safety following up the procedures. The only difference is that between the discharge hose and the dome, instead of attaching it to the bottom outlet, the discharge hose is placed through the dome and almost touches the bottom of the tank. If you do not put the hose in far enough in the tank, the product splashes and gives an off excessive amount of vapor. This creates a potential fire hazard. Make sure that there's no strain on the hose or it may move and come out of the tank during the transfer operation. Always station someone on the dome to monitor the hose and signal when the tank is full. Start the filling at the reduced rate until the end of the hose is complete. Submerge in fuel. Wait at least 5 minutes after the filling stops before removing the hose. This way reduces the change in static electricity arcing when the hose is removed from the fuel. And that is you're receiving issued petroleum products using fuel system supply point subcourse QM5025 edition 6 Aipd.